This week on Quadriga, divisive election. Which America will win? In November, Americans will head to the polls to select their next president, and the country has never been more split. Challenger Mitt Romney was just nominated at his party's convention. Until now, he's been a moderate Republican, but his platform has drifted steadily to the right as he makes compromises with ultra-conservative factions within the party. Will Romney be able to convince the key voter groups he needs to oust the incumbent? Democrat Barack Obama has fulfilled promises to withdraw from Iraq and begin the process in Afghanistan. But his image continues to be tarnished by the detention camp in Guantanamo Bay. And the U.S. deficit has now ballooned almost out of control. So, will Americans choose Obama's vision or Romney's? And how will that choice affect the rest of the world? Your host on today's show, Melinda Crane.
Hello and welcome. Has the Republican convention given Mitt Romney the boost that he needed? Which America will win this election, and what will the outcome mean for the rest of the world? That's what we want to talk about today on Quadriga, and it's a rarity indeed, our guest lineup. We have 3 Americans on the show this week, all of them with a transatlantic perspective. Jared Sonnickson came to Germany in 2001 as a Fulbright scholar, and he is currently a research and teaching assistant at the Institute for Political Science at the University of Bonn. Andrew Dennison is a political scientist at the Institute for Strategic Analysis in Bonn, and he's also director of Transatlantic Networks, which is a research consortium focusing on international and domestic security policy. And Dean Moyer is an associate professor of philosophy at Johns Hopkins University. He's currently here in Berlin at the American Academy on a fellowship, and next semester he'll be going to the Westfälische Wilhelms-Universität in Münster. Dean Moyer, Mitt Romney was lagging quite far behind Barack Obama in terms of popularity. Do you think that the Republican convention has succeeded in convincing Americans that he ought to be the next president?
I don't think it's succeeded thus far, at least. Paul Ryan spoke last night, and Mitt Romney speaks tonight. We did get an attractive picture of him from his wife, Ann Romney. I'm not sure that it was enough really to sort of flesh him out for the American voter. He remains something of a character who seems to be able to get things done, but what he stands for is still somewhat unclear. He aligned himself with Paul Ryan, who spoke last night, who has very definite ideas and a very clear program. Does that do anything for Romney's likability? Very unclear to me. Whether he'll do something in his speech to humanize himself. Also unclear whether Romney himself thinks that he needs to do that or wants to do that. He portrays himself as, I can get things done, I can put people back to work, and that's all that the American people cares about. That's, I think, his view, and other people are trying to sort of push him more towards telling more of his own personal story, but I don't see that it's really happened yet.
Well, indeed, Andrew Dennison, party strategists are saying, hey, look, he doesn't have to be likable. He simply needs to be acceptable. They say that the problems that the American people are wrestling with are so great that they're not looking for their president to win a popularity contest. Do you think that's right? Is acceptable good enough?
Indeed, I think it could be, Melinda. This is a historic election in that a first-term president is not able to use the bully pulpit to pull way ahead of his opponent. Instead, because of historically high unemployment, because of a great sense of pessimism in the United States, it is possible for a flawed candidate who doesn't really appeal completely to anyone to be head-to-head with Barack Obama.
Jared Sonnickson, a flawed candidate, Andrew Dennison says, is he really what the Republican Party was looking for, do you think, or are they at this point simply making do?
Well, it's difficult to say what the Republican Party was looking for at all. I think the party itself is quite divided within that camp, but I think they'll make do with it in that sense, surely. But the Republican Party itself has been divided along, for example, the so-called Tea Party movement that came up during the primary phase and even before that with the health care reform. But on the other hand, you've also seen how Romney, who was previously a more moderate Republican, has tried to switch gears more in that direction, the sort of anti-state, reduce the amount of government spending, so on and so forth. So he's also maybe turned himself into a good compromise candidate for both of these sort of, if you will, wings of the Republican Party.
But isn't that part of his problem, the fact that he's perceived as somebody who's constantly changing his position, who doesn't have a real clear profile?
Well, I think that hits probably the nail on the head also with what exactly the Democrats are going to be trying to do, is that sort of this, he sways back and forth. I'll be curious to see what he does in the general election if health care comes up again, because that issue with health care, when he was governor of Massachusetts, a fairly similar model was introduced under his authority, but now he wants to divorce himself completely of that past. So he certainly opened himself up in that sense to a lot of criticism.
Dean Moore, you mentioned Paul Ryan. We heard a quite rousing speech from Paul Ryan, as you said. What does he have that Mitt Romney doesn't have? And is he really somebody who could swing the voters in Romney's, in the ticket's direction?
Well, he has convictions. Romney is a businessman. He ran and did fairly well as a moderate Republican in Massachusetts, but it's as Jared mentioned, that he's been switching back and forth so many times that nobody really knows what he stands for. And it's very hard in a general election to just say, look, I'm going to be the CEO of America, and it doesn't really matter what I believe or what my program